Okay, so I'd just like to get started. So hello everyone, my name is Kimberly Barr and I'm a student at Western Sydney University. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land we meet on here in Western Sydney, the Darug people, and I pay my respects to the elders past and present. I would like to pass it over to Michelle Parkins to introduce our speaker. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, so our speaker today is Emily Shen. Emily is a linguist at Appen, which is a tech company specializing in training data for machine learning and artificial intelligence products. Since her start with Appen, she has worked with over 100 languages and dialects as part of a major transcription program, with more on the way. When not at the mercy of her main client, she is often seen planning social events and charity initiatives with colleagues across the company, with adjustments for COVID times, or playing video games over coffee break. So welcome, Emily.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Just to start us off, I'd like to invite you to talk for a few minutes just to tell us your general story. For example, what has your career path been? Can you tell us about how you got into your role at Appen and what you do in your role?
Yep, so I graduated from UNSW with a Bachelor of Arts in Business, and I went on to do an honours year in arts, majoring in linguistics. During my undergrad, a tutor at the time was actually working at Appen, which put the company name on my radar. And, you know, sort of hearing about this company, like, what's this? A company that hires linguists? And that sort of got put on the back burner while I went through my studies. And during honours year, the same tutor actually sent an email around to my old supervisors asking for interested students for new positions at Appen. So I got in touch with him and I started in a casual position while finishing my honours year. And after that, I shifted to full-time the following year. And yeah, so since then I've been working mostly on that transcription program and sort of becoming a bit of a specialist of that program as a result. But I also, you know, work on a couple of other occasional projects, ad hoc tasks, so things that might relate to language research, text normalization, that kind of stuff.
Thank you. It all sounds fascinating. I'm really excited to hear more from you about careers in linguistics. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a series of questions that Emily has been kind enough to agree to answer. And then we're going to open it up to a Q&A. So if anyone has any further questions, you can type them in the chat and we'll pick them up at the end, provided we've got time. So I'm just going to, just a quick reminder, the session is being recorded today, just so that everyone is aware, and will be available at some point in the future, yet to be determined, for students to watch. So I'm going to hand over to Christy, who's going to go through some questions for Emily to answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. I'm Christy. I just wanted to lay some house rules that Michelle's already mentioned. It is a recorded session, so if you could please mute your mic. We don't want any accidental interruptions happening throughout the session. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We can get to them, but we will answer them at the end of the session. And just for courtesy, if you would be able to turn off your camera, it's just we have such a large volume of people on the call. We might have a bit of a slow connection. And yeah, I'll get started. Are you ready, Emily?
Ready as ever.
All right. So Emily, my first question for you is, could you give us an overview of what Appen is and what exactly does Appen do?
Yep, so it's a company that specializes in providing high quality training data for organizations and their AI products. So if you think about like what goes into technology, like voice assistants, text-to-speech applications, auto captioning, you know, none of it can really operate if the machines don't have any idea how to make sense of the jumble of human sounds that we make and pass them into words. And, this technology is also limited by the quality of the data. So if I don't know if you remember when voice assistants were generally quite new, and they were generally having a very awful time recognizing Australian accents. So, you need good, diverse data sets to help address that gap. And that's essentially what we provide, really good, diverse data sets, training data that helps train them to work for as many people as possible across as many places as possible.
Great. And could you give us an insight into your average day or average week and what it looks like in Appen? And what kind of tasks are you responsible for? You were mentioning you were ahead with the transcription in your own field. Could you give us a bit of insight into that?
Yep, so my day-to-day at Appen is generally busy. The program I'm on spans over 100 languages and dialects. We might actually be pushing 150 at this point, who knows. So we're constantly delivering transcription data to the client for different languages and from different locales. So the team that I'm on handles the processing of that raw transcription data, and we clean it up, format it, normalize it, and we deliver it to the client when it's basically met our standards. So this can involve, depending on the language, this can involve like additional steps like spelling standardization. Sometimes we might need to do research for new languages being added to the program. I did mention before text normalization, that's a relatively new thing that we've been doing, which basically aligns speech with accepted written conventions. So, common standard abbreviations for certain spoken forms, like street being written as ST.
Right, interesting. Thank you. And Emily, while you're working at Appen, do you think you will be staying at Appen in the near future, maybe 5 or 10 years? Is there any opportunity for you to advance in the company or elsewhere in the industry, not just Appen?
There are definitely streams for career progression in Appen. I personally still have no idea where I'll see myself in 5 to 10 years. But there are a lot of people here who have been working here for, I think one's reached 15, 20 years recently. And so, I'm quite happy to stay on for as long, for as long as they'll have me. But there's also, taking the time off to go and do a PhD is also not completely off the table for me. So who knows?
We all don't know the future, do we?
No.
So before getting your job at Appen, was there any background knowledge that you had to know, for example, IPA? Was there any tech or programming you had to be knowledgeable, or did they provide training for the job?
So they do provide training for the more computational, the technical aspects of that. Obviously, if you have a bit of prior knowledge, your learning curve will be a lot smaller. But I think technical linguistics is especially useful, even if you don't necessarily work with it as directly. It still underpins a lot of what we do. So, yeah. So I wouldn't put the computational part as much of a hard requirement, but the technical linguistics definitely very useful.
Right. Could you also, so you're talking about technical linguistics. Was there any certain skills or, as you said, the background knowledge is quite useful. Is there any other crucial things to help you succeed in the role? Because it might be challenging to start off with. Was there any skills that you had to build to assist your career?
Is this just like more general skills, not necessarily
more
industries?
General skills?
Yeah.
It could be something from different disciplines, things like that.
I think that you have your usual skills or qualities that you sort of need to work anywhere, really. Adaptability, problem solving, critical thinking, great communication skills, a willingness to learn new things. But there's also, I think that there's a few sort of understated qualities and skills that that are also really valued here at Appen: empathy, being open to all sorts of backgrounds and ethnicities, and just being very inclusive. Because it is essentially, we can't do the work that we do if we don't have that. Let me rephrase. They're not just like vague values, but they're a crucial part of what we do. Like, we can't do the work that we do and succeed without that basic inclusion.
Right, you need a little bit more just to get through Appen. So Emily, what kind of drew you to linguistics? Was there a certain aspect of linguistics that interests you, or was there something you've heard or read that made you want to pursue to study in linguistics?
I think in hindsight, it was something that I was always interested in. Bit of context, this is not my first degree. I went in a completely different field before I found linguistics. But I grew up exposed to a whole bunch of different Chinese languages growing up. I picked up Japanese in high school. I dabbled a little bit in Korean in uni. And I was always interested in the comparisons and contrasts that I could make between the languages. And when I got to actually doing the courses in linguistics, I found that I really enjoyed the technical side of things. So morphology, syntax, phonology, and all that fun stuff. On the Appen, in regards to Appen, I mentioned before I was made aware of the existence of Appen by that tutor. And I just sort of honed in on it as one of the few jobs in linguistics that I had ever heard of, aside from working in academia or speech path. And not only that, but I also wanted to know a bit more about how linguistics intersected with technology, especially as technology has become such a huge part of our lives. It's practically unavoidable.
That's exactly right. You find language in everything, and technology is everywhere now. So while you were studying in your undergrad, did you find there was any relevant material that you studied in your undergrad, such as the JAS programs, maybe Python for coding? Was there anything like that that you are using now at Appen that you learnt in the undergrad?
So I can't speak exactly to the computer science side of things because I never actually took any courses there. I went in without any prior experience, and it was a very steep learning curve. But in terms of the linguistics side of things, so as I mentioned before, typology, phonology, they were especially useful in this line of work. I don't know if you've ever done an assignment where you've had to do research on a particular language and its features, but I did do something like that in third year, and it was still very applicable for me here. Just preparing those documents, language research documents. When a client asks, oh, we want to pick up this language, what do you know? And just going through analyzing like what's relevant, what do they need to know? They'll need to know things about the character sets that the language uses in writing. Are there any issues with spelling variation, common confusion sets, and things like that? So a lot of the analytical skills you develop in linguistics are very applicable here.
That's great to know, because some people hate writing those reports, and we finally know that it might be useful down the road.
You get paid for it later on.
Oh, even better. So I'm guessing with the audience that we have, some people might know one or two. As you said, Emily, you learned Japanese and Korean. We all wanted to know, you kind of mentioned it before, but how you utilize it. So if, as you said, a client asks you if they want to learn a language, you go through that. Is there any other way, say, for example, if you're fluent in another language, could you help with transcription, things like that? Could you kind of give us an overview on how you can use a language learnt or speak in Appen?
Yep, so you can contribute to the documentation of those languages, especially if it's a language that's not as thoroughly documented as like your European languages, and so on and so forth. But even if you don't have that sort of professional fluency in the language, for example, I don't consider myself professionally fluent in Japanese, but I do know enough about it that I know what looks wrong in the raw data. I know, for example, Japanese doesn't use spacing, so I know that there are different challenges in regards to languages that don't use spacing. Right. And then there are also certain issues with spelling variation that I'm aware of just from exposure to the language. So they're not necessarily, there's just sort of little things here and there that, we're constantly contributing documentation to our little database of language information, and every little bit helps, really.
So if, for example, you don't know, as you said, you don't know too much, you can always come with some little knowledge into Appen and kind of expand when you work there. Which is great to know, because we can't know 100 to 150 different languages. So it's good that you get to learn on the job, or even use that little exposure from university to go into a career. So Emily, my next question for you is, when you went into Appen and you kind of build this expectation, or when you go into work, you think, oh, it's going to be this and this. Was there anything that you found that was quite impactful in a positive way or a negative way that didn't meet those expectations?
I think I went from working in hospitality to office work. So for me, a lot of that, change. Yes. So a lot of that was just not knowing what to expect of office life. Like, I thought maybe it might be more mellow compared to peak hospitality hours, which, it's a different kind of busy. Like, right. It's still very hectic. It's just more intellectually hectic than perhaps emotionally or physically hectic. Things like that. I did have this sort of vague general assumption that, going into this line of work, I would probably be working with people similarly nerdy. And my expectations were exceeded. They're even nerdier and even more brilliant than I am. So that was fantastic.
Okay, so my last question for you, Emily. If one of us were to look for a similar career path in language technology, or even to apply Appen, could you give us some advice in where we could look to pursue it, and things like that, things that you've learned that you can pass on to someone else?
Yeah, I do have sort of the general advice of, be open, be nice, be curious. There's a lot of exciting work to be done in this field, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at Appen. We've got a few people, a few former colleagues who have, been able to advance their careers elsewhere, sometimes in localization or translation, sometimes working kind of on the client's perspective, as opposed to Appen. And, it took a lot of work to get Australian English, for example, recognized by technology like Siri. And that's only one accent in one language. And we have so many more languages to cover, so many more accents. And, it's not just the dominant accent in that locale, it's all the other different communities that we want to sort of improve AI for.
Right. Thank you so much, Emily, for answering those questions. I'm going to pass the reins off to Kimberly, who you met previously. She's going to moderate some of the questions that you guys may have for Emily. So thank you again, Emily.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Emily, and thank you, Christy, for facilitating the questions. I'll now open up to the Q&A session. If anybody has a question, as Michelle said in the chat, I would like to invite you to type your question so they could be answered by Emily.
For you. It's jobs in IT for transcription, like talking jobs. Linguistic
Sorry,
technology. Вы спрашиваете, вы хочешь слушать, нет? Хорошо.
So I think what we'll do is we'll start with the questions in the chat, although Marina, if you'd just like to ask your question again so we can be clear on what you're asking. But other than that, we'll start with the questions in the chat, and then if there's time at the end, we can always ask people to ask out loud if you like. But Marina, can you just repeat your question? Okay, maybe go to the ones in the chat.
Okay, so the first one I can see is from Leticia. I'm very sorry for the pronunciation. So Emily, what would you say that there is a lot of demand for people to work in linguistic technology? And if so, what skill sets would you say are most in demand?
I think the demand is increasing. I think especially after last year, when we saw everyone basically moving online and becoming even more reliant on technology, and our work increased as well over the past year. What I want to, I'm not sure what you mean by like what kind of skill sets, as in certain, like, are we talking in linguistics or general skills, or?
Would you say in general?
For specific fields of linguistics or more tech backgrounds. For my line of work, I found morphology, phonology quite useful. I mean, it is transcription, so there is all that to. I would obviously focus more heavily on those aspects. For the tech backgrounds, if you have Python, Terminal, Vim, those kinds of skills, we use them like every day. So if you can sort of get a little bit of, if you can just dip your toes in that and get a feel for how it's like to work with that, that will be really helpful.
Thank you so much. So there was a question from Maddie. Where could you find similar positions?
Similar positions. I haven't actually gone looking outside of Appen, to be honest. But there are things like localization managers, translation managers. A lot of them sort of work in software companies and things like that. For example, Canva, I know a couple of former colleagues work there, and you know, in order for their software to work across different languages, you have to consider how that language displays. For example, Arabic displays right to left, and there are different considerations to make for those languages. So I think that there's a lot of, maybe not identical positions, but there are similar positions where you can find meaningful work in linguistics.
Thank you for that, Emily. Luke, so how long do you spend working on each data set?
That will depend on the language. If I find that the languages that use Latin scripts, or Latin, Greek, Cyrillic, those ones I think are generally easier to work with. I think purely from the perspective that they're the most, especially with Latin scripts, it's the most familiar to me. And it really, I think the more challenging ones do take a few days, sometimes a couple of weeks, depending on how much reworking needs to be done to get that up to standard. But for the simpler data sets, like a day, couple of days.
And I guess, so what languages would you have found the most challenging again?
Which language?
Yes.
I would say for me, any language that uses like abbreviated scripts, so alpha syllabary scripts, anything that involves diacritics, or which can, because they pose their own set of challenges with combining to things, and the challenges of I guess non-Latin scripts in Terminal and Vim, because it won't behave the way you expect it to. Although that said, I suppose unspaced languages are also a different kind of challenging, especially when you try to apply things like autocorrects and whatnot. It's because there's no white space boundary to work with, it's so much more challenging to work with.
And every language has its complexities.
Definitely.
So another question, who are really the clients that brings these transcription projects to your company, and what tools do you use to aid your analysis?
Join Appen and find out. I am not at liberty to say. But yeah, what tools do we use to aid our analysis? We do have a bunch of in-house scripts that we use to, give us different summaries. So we have like a word list generator. We have another script that just generates an account of every single code point in the document that we're working with. And that gives us a good, things like that give us a good overview of, what's happening, if there's any weird things to watch out for, things like that. We do collaborate a lot with our project engineering team to, if we notice a particular pattern arising in certain languages, we might go to them and say, look, can you help make a script that might cover these particular oddities?
Very interesting. Okay, so what is Appen? Is an Australian company that is specialized in translation technology.
It's an AI training data company. So it's kind of like I say speech tech or speech data, but it's more than just that. It's, we cover images, video, audio, all sorts of stuff. It is an Australian company. We're based in Chatswood. And yeah, so, and it's not just translation, it's transcription, it's text to speech, it's linguistic research. There's many things that, there's many different kinds of data that our clients want, and we provide that.
And are there opportunities for international students to work remotely for Appen right now?
We do actually have overseas offices, if that helps. So we do have offices in the Philippines, in the US, UK, in China. There might be another one I've overlooked, I'm not sure. But we do have remote workers across the globe. The best way to check would probably be via the Appen jobs portal, which I don't immediately have a link to, but there are opportunities.
And would you know what would be required for a successful job application in Appen?
This one's difficult because I'm not exactly in a decision-making position, but I'm not too sure. I mean, I think you just have, obviously you have to have a strong background in linguistics, and you don't necessarily have to have a strong technical background, but it does help if, if you can demonstrate that you're able to, if you're not sure of something, you're able to look that up and troubleshoot where needed, and being able to, demonstrate your problem solving and critical thinking skills will be really helpful in your application.
So are there any particular linguistic tools or programs that would benefit someone interested in this line of work?
I'm not too sure. I would probably need to ask around in the department to see if there are any other specific general linguistic tools. We do have quite a bunch of in-house tools that we do work with. But yeah.
And there was a question from Luke. What did you do for your honors?
It was Japanese Twitter slang, roughly. To put it very briefly, I did like a sort of mini corpus thing where I think I collected 2 minutes of data based around a known slang word and did analysis around that.
So do you have any opportunities to travel in your role, domestically or internationally? For example, are there conferences you attend as part of your role or opportunities to take your job to collaborate with colleagues overseas?
Not for me. I don't think I'm quite at that level just yet. But you know, who knows?
One day. Are there internship opportunities at Appen for linguistic students or students in other fields? Do you know how students go about applying?
We do have an annual internship program we started a few years ago, and that's been running pretty well now. They usually come around close to end of year. I think last time it was about November, December. But we do send around information to the lecturers and professors when it does come around. And you know, I definitely let my supervisors know when they come around. So keep an ear out towards end of year.
Sorry about that, Emily. Would you know how often?
How often? The internship program is an annual one. So once a year.
Thank you for that. And another question, how big is the company? So how many employees are majority linguistics? Are there other similar companies in Australia, or is it just Appen unique?
I think Appen's a bit of a rare one in Australia, because most of the big linguistic or tech companies tend to be in the US. And we've just sort of carved out our own niche here. And we are quite a large company. We are listed on the ASX. I don't know the full details myself, but yeah, they're publicly available anyway.
Thank you so much for that, Emily. Is there anyone who would like to type in a question? A question from Luke. How is your work/life balance?
Generally okay. I think it did suffer a bit last year with everyone shifting to work from home. And so that sort of mental barrier between work and home just went out the window. But we are shifting back in, we're back 2 days in the office now, which has helped a lot. You know, I make a point of not doing massive overtime or anything like that. And everyone is all on board here. You know, we try not to work. We try not to work more than we need to, and we do enjoy our after work parties and things like that.
Wonderful. Is it a good company for translators to work in Appen?
We do have quite a few translators or people who went through uni doing translation and things and found work in Appen. We do have a few translation projects. I don't know how many, I don't know off the top of my head how many there are, but they do exist. We do. Actually, we have done a lot of interesting and important work. If you look up TICO19, TICO19, that was a massive translation initiative for basically translating COVID information into 38 different languages. I can actually drop a link to that. There was a paper that went with that. There we go. Oh, no, never mind. I'm not used to Zoom DMs.
Thank you for that, Emily. Does anybody else have any questions? I think that's it then. Thank you so much, Emily. Oh, wait, there's another question. Would being bilingual and knowing several languages and having a teaching degree in English as a second language be advantageous?
I think it's incredibly useful. I did mention before, you know, that we're always looking to add to our resources around different languages. It's definitely not like a requirement to have to know a second language or anything like that, but it does help a lot in your day-to-day work.
Does Appen ever do the machine learning part, or is it all the initial preparing of the data?
No. So the clients come to us with their machines and say, we need data for this. And that's what we do. I don't know if there's any, I don't know if we would be looking into setting up our own things, but you know, these are decisions that are a bit higher than me.
Are there any more questions? Does Appen, oh no, sorry, we've already done that. Is it transcribing mainly or other data projects?
There's a whole bunch of projects. It's not just transcribing. We do a bit of in-house data collection as well, where, you know, we say some projects might require fluent speakers or native speakers of this particular language from this particular locale. And that they're their own team. They do a lot of interesting work. And, you know, we also do different linguistic projects as well. We do translation projects. There's probably a few others off the top of my head. Yeah. So it's quite varied. And I think in different departments, you also have image annotation and video annotation and all that sort of stuff, but that's not quite linguistic.
I've just got a message from Kim. Her laptop has crashed, so I might take over the Q&A.
Yeah.
I haven't got a name, but I've got this question, and this person has their PhD in linguistics and CELTA from RMIT. They were wondering if there was any job opportunities for in Appen for them.
There should be. I don't know of specific job opportunities. But yeah, there's always, you know, we regularly have opportunities for linguists in Appen.
Yeah, it shouldn't matter the different disciplines, right? As long as you have some knowledge of linguistics.
Yeah, like we have a whole bunch of former PhD students and just people of different qualification levels and things like that.
Right. So Caroline has asked, so if you're a Year 10 high school student, would there be any specific subjects that you'd be able to get into your current career? Would English or something mathematical programming be advantageous?
I'm not sure what they cover in high school nowadays. But I think that I do remember there being an elective in computer science or something similar. And I imagine that would have been quite useful.
Like ICT or something like that.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Okay, one from Maddie. Are there ethics involved? And if so, how are they involved in your work?
So I think that mostly comes out in our negotiations with our clients. Sort of, we're always raising like, oh, have you considered these people, or have you, you know, they might say, I'm just sort of making up an example here. I've never actually been in client meetings, but they might say, oh, we need, you know, specific these specific phrases done and we won't accept any others. And from our side, we might go, well, hang on, these people are clearly using this other phrase quite regularly. Shouldn't we actually shift more towards what these people are actually saying rather than what you would like for them to say?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything, I guess it would be more confidential, so I'll leave that to me. So someone's curious into how many languages do you speak or know? Because that's arbitrary.
at very varying levels. I do have heritage Cantonese and Shanghainese, which are dwindling away as we speak. I can sort of understand sort of basic conversational Mandarin. My mum speaks Hakka, which is a bit beyond me. I can maybe pick out some key phrases, but that's about it. Japanese, I'm actually oddly more comfortable with nowadays. It's just something that I could just maintain in the background. And Korean was only very just basic level.
Right. Another question is, how should I meet someone in Appen? Would that be through internet application or could you network?
I think that would be via the jobs portal. Is probably the easiest way.
And there'd be no email contact for anyone specifically in Appen, I think. Is that right, Emily?
I could ask around, but yeah, I mean, I can, and if they're okay with it, then I can drop an email afterwards.
Yep, we might put our email in to keep that, going. Another question, so where do you get the training data from? It was built in-house, was it not?
Yeah, so we receive whatever needs to, for example, if it's transcription data, the client provides the audio or the video or whatever that needs to be transcribed. We have an in-house crowd basically across the globe, across I think some 200 plus languages. They're the ones who basically transcribe the data for us. And then it comes back to us and we work with that.
Right. All right, I'm going to leave this as the last question because we're nearly out of time. Is it essential to have another language or rather linguistics? Would one weigh heavier than the other?
Linguistics more so than we have monolingual linguists here. Yeah, one of them I'm reasonably close with at work, and he's utterly brilliant. But yeah, so I would value the linguistics background over fluency in other languages. Right.
Okay, everyone, it's nearly 5:15, so we might leave it there. Thank you so much, Emily, for answering our questions. We do have a Western Sydney Facebook page if everyone's interested. If not, you don't have to. But yeah, there's a short survey after this that will be sent to people's emails. If you could complete it just to let us know how the session went and what our demographic is, that would be greatly appreciated. But thank you again, Emily. It was really exciting to know that there's other jobs that are not speech pathology or academics.
Thank you for having me. I hope I did clarify a lot of things for you guys.
No, thank you. All right, everyone.